In case anyone else needs
No,
to
no,
join.
here you go. So,
for it.
because today's
Alright.
Cassandra's sort of birthday, and today we're gonna try to tell the Aristocrats joke.
Why don't you try saying
Most
it?
of you might not be familiar with it, but get ready because it's gonna be pretty intense.
You will be.
All right. So Cassandra, I'll give it to you, and I'll take over in a little bit.
Right. So, guy walks into a talent agency, comes up to the person at the desk, and he says, "Boy, have I got an act for you." And the guy at the desk says, "What the fuck is it? I am about ready to leave. I've seen every fucking thing you could present to me. What the fuck do you think you have to present to me that I could possibly want to put in a show?" And then he says,
I got a family act for you. And then he says, what do you mean? And he's like, well, let me show you. So he grabs him, his wife, his two children, and they pretend and they perform an act in front of him. Now, the guy goes up to his daughter, tears off her dress, and says to him, he begins to then grab her breast, put them together, and as she's bleeding everywhere, the son begins to come over and start making out with her. Now, little to know, the daughter comes up and then begins to grab poop into her hand, hold it into her hand, and grab the feces and shove it in everybody's face. Ooh. And two people's face. The nearest people. Not sure if it's the son, not sure if it's the father, but that's how it starts. And that's all I got. I can't think of anything.
Well, what do you call the act?
And I call the act the Aristocrats.
So, this father's man walks into a talent agency. Guy's sitting at the desk. He says, "I've got a great act for you. It's a family act. You wouldn't believe what you're gonna see." And the guy says, "Honestly, I get so many acts coming through here these days. If you just suck my cock, just give me a blowjob on the spot, like I don't give a fuck. Like, you can have it. Like I just want somebody to suck my cock." And he says, the man is like he's taken aback. Obviously, he's a family man, a good man, a hardworking man. And he says, "No, this is ridiculous. I don't need this. You know, I work hard with my family night and day to put this act together. We promote ourselves. It's all self-promotion." And the guy says, I know that, but honestly, like I just want a blowjob. Like that's all I want right now." And the guy is just like, "No, like this is ridiculous. Like out of the question. Like." They go back and forth for like 5 to 10 minutes, and eventually the television says, "Okay, all right. So what do you call it?" And the guy says,
"Okay, so I'll put this down." Okay, so this guy walks into a talent agency, and the dude at the desk looks really bored and unimpressed. But the guy's like, "Hey, I've got an act for you. I swear, it's really good." And the guy's just like, "Yeah, I've had a long day, man. I'm about to go home. Like, what could you possibly tell me that'll accept? I've seen everything." And he's like, No, you haven't seen this. It's a one-time only act. You'll make tons of money, I promise. Just give me a couple minutes, like I'll tell you the joke." You know, he's like, "Fine, go ahead." So the guy's like, "Okay, so this is the act. It involves my whole family. My wife, my kids, my pet, my grandparents might even be there. There's a spotlight on the stage. My wife, she's naked, she's tied up to these rigs. The audience watches for a couple minutes, nothing happens, she's crying. I come out on stage. I let my kids out of a cage. They're inside with the dog. The dog's totally trained, the kids aren't. I let the kids out. Now the boy, he's been in a couple acts, he knows what's going on, but the girl, I mean, she's a virgin. This is her first time actually being introduced to the family act. So, I come to my wife, she's ready, and, or maybe not so ready, we had to stitch her vagina up a little bit from the last act, and it's still a bit sore. There's some stitches, they're crusting over, they're healing, but not quite. So we gotta, I spread her legs open. We get them as wide open as possible with the ropes. She's in this contraption. And I really have to shit. So this is the beginning of the act. I spread her open, like, I break her open almost like a wishbone. And I start crapping inside of her vagina. And I'm just going, there's corn, you know what I mean? All that good stuff, but it's mostly diarrhea, because I ate a lot of ghost pepper sauce. and I just want to make sure that I can fit as much as possible in there, so I gotta take a break, and I pound my fist inside, and I want to make sure I get that shit rammed inside, because I'm starting to feel like I might have to puke a little bit, and I need to get the puke inside of her vagina. So there it comes. I puke inside of her vagina, and the stitches are starting to rip open. There's pus and there's a little blood coming out, but this is really turning me on. And all of a sudden I have to shit, because when I get really turned on I have to shit. So I squat back down and say, "Son, get over here and suck my dick." So he comes over and he starts sucking on my dick, and I'm just like so hard. And I'm crapping at the same time, and I'm like, God, this is the best blumpkin I've had in my life. And then I'm like, "Daughter, why aren't you masturbating? Haven't you ever touched yourself?" And so we're watching her, and this is turning me on even more. And so, like, we've just got this whole thing going on. It's beautiful. And then the baby crawls out, our newborn baby crawls out onto the stage, and I don't think I've ever been this excited, because that hole has got to be even tighter than anything I've ever experienced. So all of a sudden the shit stops, and I'm getting up, and I say, "Fifi," that's the dog's name, "get over here." And I say, "Wife, just tilt up down a little bit so that the dog can start eating out of your vagina." And so the dog and the son actually really likes to poop and puke, and so they both come over and they're eating out of the mom's vagina. And the dad, while this is happening, is like masturbating. And like he comes over to the baby, and and he's just like, "Oh my God!" And he, you know, licks his fingers a little bit for lubrication, and like starts to finger the baby's asshole. And so he's getting in there, and it's just so tight, so hard. But because it's bleeding a little bit, because I mean, you know, obviously it's really raw, there's some more lubrication going on, so he tries to get his whole fist in there, and he actually ends up popping his whole like arm and fist out of the baby's mouth, and all the teeth come out that are like starting to come in. There's not a lot, maybe 2, so it's not a big deal. But he just keeps fisting, and he's so turned on, like masturbating at the same time, that he doesn't realize that the baby's just like a carcass on his arm, like he's roasting it like a duck or something. And the mom is looking over at this, and she's like, "I'm gonna come." And the dad's like, "You can't come, you stupid bitch." Like the act's not over, and so like he comes over and he starts beating his wife in the face, and her eye pops out, and like he's just like with the baby like on his arm pushed all the way up, starts fingering like her eye socket. And the son, I mean, there's just like cum flying everywhere, and then the daughter is like puking because she doesn't even know what's happening, and the dad is so happy about all this. He looks over and he sees his daughter. He's so excited. His dick is so hard still, and he comes over. And he can't even do it, he just comes all over the place. And the camera agent is just like, you know, it's like his jaws like drops to the floor, and he's just like, "What do you call this act?" And the guy's like, "What do you mean? It's the Aristocrats."